see you move like that. Like what? Like that. When you see you move like that, just like that.
There is good news and there's bad news. The good news is that I will be joined by two of the four co-hosts of one of Britain's biggest podcasts in a second. The bad news is I have some PowerPoint slides to go through before we do that. For those that don't know, Audioboom is one of the world's biggest podcast networks. So we are the UK's only podcast network that lives inside the top 5 podcast networks in the US. And here in the UK, we estimate that 1 in 4 podcast listens happens to an Audioboom show. So if we're not already on your media plan, that's a 25% incremental growth that you can add to your media plan just by buying shows on Audioboom. And the shows you'll be buying are some of the biggest and best in the UK. This is a small selection of them. Naturally, you would expect you can buy spot campaigns across our network. You can buy dynamically inserted host reads on shows or on particular verticals. We absolutely do that. And that is the way to reach that 25% of audience that you're not currently reaching. But you can also buy shows that are perhaps not living in the audio space only. So one of the things that I think we've talked about a lot this year in the podcast market is the rise of the visualized podcast, and it's largely down to YouTube as a platform. It's nothing new though, really. So YouTube as a platform, depending on which survey you look at, is either the second or third biggest podcast consumption platform in the world. So lots of people are already consuming their podcasts in YouTube, and we know that, and YouTube have decided that they've figured that out now as well, and they've taken the decision to shut down Google Podcasts, which is their own podcatcher, and they're going to start to move their audience over to YouTube Music. So that's an audience that we are already talking to with a number of our shows, because there's a huge amount of shows on our network that already deliver a huge amount of their audience share through visualized podcasts and podcasts that already are housed on YouTube. And to the extent that the 5 shows that I'm showing here, over a single episode release, collectively, they will deliver over 2 million YouTube views. And that's 2 million YouTube views that is only accessible via Audioboom. So if you want to get into those shows, we can and we do sell advertising that lives on those podcasts living on YouTube. And I think the talk is whether YouTube will be the future of podcasting. I think it kind of already is. And we know that because we're here and we're doing it, and it really does work. And I think that it's going to become, probably 2024's story for podcasting. So that's it. That's the PowerPoint done. I said it was short. I'm just before I bring them on stage, I'm going to be joined by 2 of the 4 hosts of, as I've said, one of the biggest podcasts in the UK. It's a podcast that Spotify named as one of their podcasts of the decade. The New York Times said they've never released a dud episode, and No Such Thing as a Fish is the show. They have had 450 million downloads to their show. They've performed the show 150 times. They've performed the show 150 times live. And just last week, they released a very landmark episode number 500. So please welcome to the stage from No Such Thing as a Fish, Andrew Hunter-Murray and James Harkin.
Hello.
Hello.
Apologies for that needlessly grand intro.
I liked
Bit much, wasn't it? Bit much.
It was a bit much, but we paid someone to make it, so
Yeah.
at least we got to use it twice now.
John Soper was on this stage before. Come on, you've got to raise the bar. It's okay.
Who? No, sorry. Sorry, John, if you're in.
Now, in the unlikely event there's anybody in this room who hasn't heard the show, give us a quick overview of what No Such Thing as a Fish does.
It's just a show about interesting facts. The four of us who do it, we all used to or still work on QI, and each week, each one of us has one interesting fact. It might be about diamonds, it might be about Tanzania, it might be about ferrets, it can be about literally anything in the world. And we talk about that, and we tell each other what we found out. And that's kind of it.
Yeah, that is it. It could be about ferrets finding diamonds in Tanzania.
Yeah.
It doesn't, we don't know what it's going to be about. But the thing is, like, we just find the interesting in the mundane. We kind of look for the most interesting things we can. And for some reason, people like to listen to it. Yeah. But yeah.
And I mentioned just then, you've just released episode 500. You're on the verge of releasing episode 501. Yeah. You are a few months away from your 10th anniversary. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And but tell us when it started. Where was the genesis of the idea?
Well, it started almost 10 years ago. No, it started when we were in the QI offices, which were in Covent Garden, now in Holborn, and we were researching for the TV show QI, like Andy says, for the BBC, and we just found that we had all these extra facts that we couldn't use on the TV show, and day in, day out, we would sit together and just throw facts at each other. And someone said, well, maybe we should turn it into a podcast because this was a new medium that was up and coming, and why don't we try that?
Yeah.
And how different is episode 1 to episode 500?
They're almost identical. The only... there is one major difference, which is that for the first, 100 episodes, we had one mic between us. And we were all leaning in when we wanted to say something. And then we got some extra mics eventually. So, yeah. That's the main difference. The format is the same.
You now have 4 mics.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
We do. We even have one spare.
Yeah.
5 mics.
I know.
So what would episode 500 you tell episode 1 you?
Oh, get 3 extra microphones now. Do it. It's worth it. Yeah.
I always think I would say listen to Dan. Because Dan Schreiber, who's one of the other people on the podcast with Anna Toshinsky and the two of us, he always said from the very start that our show was going to be big. He genuinely believed it. The rest of us were just kind of going along for the ride a little bit, but he had seen that in America, podcasts were starting to get bigger and bigger, and he thought that in the UK, the same would happen. And if we could get in on the ground floor, we would have a chance of being a really, really big podcast and maybe going on to do hundreds of episodes. None of us believed him.
No.
Genuinely, none of us believed him, but we kind of just went along with it anyway.
Well, so when did you start believing it? Because obviously it did become massive.
I'm not sure I believe him yet. I don't know. I don't think there was a moment. I mean, from the first time we uploaded an episode, it got more listeners than we thought it would, and we had this amazing period near the start where just more and more people were trying it out. I don't know what.
For me, it was like when the numbers on the internet became real. So we put our first few episodes, our first 50 episodes on, I think it was SoundCloud or something.
Yeah.
And we would see the figures go up and we could see we were getting thousands of people listening. But they're just numbers. They might be Russian porn bots. We don't know that anyone's actually listening to it. But then it was when we went to Audioboom, we could suddenly see where everyone was. So we could actually go into our analytics and say, wow, we actually have this many thousand people in London and this many people in Sydney and this many people in Perth and whatever. And then secondarily, it was when we went on tour and you saw that those numbers were actually real people. And we would go and we would play a show and there would be thousands of people who, they weren't just porn bots. They were actual human beings.
Real humans.
Yeah.
And so describe those live shows. So they are, 2015, 18 months after episode 1?
Yeah, our first one was in a room. It wasn't even a room above a pub. It was a room below a pub, and it was to 40 people in the basement of a pub called Aces and Eights, which is in Kentish Town, and we tried it, and it sold out, and we thought we'd go a bit bigger, and then we did our first mini tour in the UK, And then I think within the first few years, we'd gone to Australia and New Zealand and Europe, and we did America as well. So it's got a lot bigger than we thought definitely than we thought it would be.
Yeah.
And you played quite a big venue in Australia.
We played the Sydney Opera House, which was amazing.
That's
it
a
was
round
really
of applause.
amazing.
Come on, that's a round of applause.
It was mad because obviously we hadn't. Yeah, we didn't
Well, it
think
was
we
just
would fill it.
completely ridiculous.
Yeah, it was.
Because
yeah.
we were just like four dorks from London who were really behind the scenes people in a TV show, and all of a sudden we were in the most iconic building, one of in the world, the place with the deepest cellars in the entire world, the Sydney Opera House. That's what I was excited to see.
Is that true?
And, yeah.
I didn't know that. But that's the thing about podcasting is that you see where your audience are, and you get to go and do shows wherever they are, and then you get to meet them afterwards. It's a very when people listen to it, like, people often have their podcast, and people love listening to their particular podcast, whatever it is.
We've hardly ever not sold out a show anywhere in the world, and the reason being that we can see exactly where all our fans are, so they won't book us into a city where we don't know that we have X number of fans. Cool. And if we don't have that many in one city, they'll put us in a smaller room, and if they know we're big in another city, they'll put us in a bigger room. So that, if I compare that to some of my friends who are musicians, for instance, they just don't get that. They just turn up at a city and fingers crossed.
And on your most recent tour, so you did a run at the Soho Theatre.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned Anna already. Anna, one of the hosts, is on maternity leave, and so you drafted in lots of guests to fill Anna's seat.
Yeah.
Tell us about some of the guests that you had on recently.
We have Richard Osman, which was very exciting for all of us because he's a big comedy hero of ours. Who else do we have? Hannah Fry, who's a brilliant mathematician and broadcaster.
Susie Dent.
Susie Dent.
She's really good.
Great, yeah, she's amazing.
Next week, spoiler alert, we have David Mitchell
Yeah.
coming on the show, which is really exciting. I can't really say much more about that because he really goes a bit crazy, doesn't he, Mitchell? Yeah, he's slagging people off. No, he isn't.
Oh, left and right. But they're all long dead kings of England that he's slagging off, so it's not. Yeah.
And I mean, we've already talked about some of the numbers that you've racked up with not only the recorded version of the show, the live versions as well. So for those that don't know, a month or two ago, there's a research company called Edison Research, and Edison Research put out a quarterly podcast ranker out in the States, and a couple of months ago they released their first ever one in the UK, and you guys placed in the top 10. So this is the most popular podcasts in the country, most listened to podcasts in the country, your top 10, and apart from Joe Rogan, you are the longest running show on that list, and you are the longest running UK show on that list.
Right, yeah. It's weird because obviously podcasting is a really big passion for lots of people, and people love making the shows, and we do feel like, because when we came out 6 months before Serial, and we think maybe that was why a lot of people came to Fish, is because they listened to Serial, and then they thought, oh, well, what else is out there, and our show was there at the time. But we were talking about this the other day. We feel like we were talking about how crocodiles evolved 50 million years ago, and they basically haven't changed since then. And we're kind of the crocodile of the podcast world.
I think so,
just
because
kind
you
of
see
keep,
people coming in and going, don't they? And especially with the Apple charts, which kind of helps you if you're a new podcast, because it's how well you've done compared to previous weeks or whatever. So if you're a new podcast, you go right up near the top, and then you'll drop again, and you go up. And yet we've been in that top 10 for pretty much the whole of our 10 years. Yeah. So it was really nice to see that new poll
really
come in. Yeah, it was really exciting actually.
It's really impressive, and I think your growth has obviously coincided with the growth of your audience, of course, and that's pushed it on. And the advertising that Audioboom sells into the show obviously is sustained that. Yeah. So I think when you guys work with clients, and there's lots of clients in the room here, I think you're very meticulous about who you want to work with. And it means that for me, it means you understand your audience really well. So what does a client get from you when they do work with you?
Well, we often talk to the clients because clients will have a particular focus on the kind of campaign they want to run. And so we'll have a chat with them. We'll say, this is exactly who you're gearing this to. And, that conversation really helps in the start. And then also we record a fresh advert for every single week that a client might be working with us. So some podcasts will have the same ad and you'll hear the same ad week after week, and you kind of get a bit too used to it. It sort of loses its freshness. For whatever reason, we just decided we want to do that differently every time. It's because we like making them funny, and it wants to be in the tone of the show as well. You know, the dream you have is that people love listening to the adverts pretty much as much as they love listening to the show.
Like some people do say that though, don't they? We have had people who have said that ours are the only adverts. Maybe they're just saying it, but they say that they'll fast forward other people's ads, but they won't fast forward ours. And it's kind of because we try and put a joke or a fact in every single one. And then we've had people, because we went to Patreon and all this stuff, and you could get like ad-free episodes. And we got people saying, well, I kind of want to pay your $1.99 a month, but I also want to carry on hearing the adverts if possible.
So we talked about doing an ad-only version of the show where you just get the ads and not the main thing. We're still working on that.
This is the room to tell that. That's perfect. So 450 million downloads and nobody fast forwards the ads. So perfect. We're going to wrap up because we're running out of time. But I just want to find out your favourite fact from the show.
It changed. I mean, we've covered so much stuff. I was looking through recently some old facts from the show, and I found one that I just love this fact. It's that in 2005 there was a male red panda, which escaped from the Birmingham Nature Reserve where he lived, and he was subsequently voted Brummie of the Year. I love that. It just tickles me. You know.
Oh, that's good. I've been reading about Venom for QI this week because we're researching for the V series of QI, which doesn't go out for like 2 years, but we're already working on it. And I was reading about the orb web spider. So some of you might know this about spiders, is like sometimes when spiders are mating, the female will eat the male straight afterwards. But with the orb web spider, the male will jump out of the way as soon as he's finished mating so that he doesn't get eaten. And he jumps away with such acceleration and such speed that I worked out that if humans did the same proportionally, then we could have sex right now and within 1 minute be in Thorpe Park.
The dream. the perfect follow-up.
I don't think there's a better place to end. So please thank you, James and Andrew and Murray from No Such Thing as a Fish.